Hello dear students, this is your BGS teacher Fariha Tasrin. Today we are going to discuss Chapter 1 Liberation Movement of Bangladesh, Lesson 3, 4, 5. The 6-point movement, historic case of Agartala, the mass uprising of 1969. Lesson 3, the 6-point movement. The 6-point movement was a movement in East Pakistan spearheaded by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman which called for greater autonomy for East Pakistan. The movement's main agenda was to realize the 6 demands put forward by a coalition of Bengali nationalist political parties in 1966 to end the perceived exploitation of East Pakistan by the West Pakistani rulers. It is considered a milestone on the road to Bangladesh's independence. Now let's see the background of 6-point program. Opposition leaders in West Pakistan called for a national conference on February 6, 1966 to assess the trend of post-Tashkent politics. On February 4th, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman along with some members of Awami League reached Lahore to attend the conference. The next day on February 5, he placed 6 points before the meeting of subject committee and urged to include the issue in the agenda of next day conference. The proposal was rejected and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was identified as separatist. On February 6, Bangabandhu boycotted the conference. On February 21, 6 points proposal was placed before the meeting of the working committee of Awami League, and the proposal was accepted unanimously. The reason for proposing 6 points was to end master-slave rule in Pakistan. Following the partition of India, the new state of Pakistan came into being. The inhabitants of East Pakistan, later Bangladesh, made up the majority of its population, and exports from East Pakistan, such as jute, were a majority of Pakistan's export income. However, East Pakistanis did not feel they had a proportional share of political power and economic benefits within Pakistan. A statistical overview of economic discrimination has been shown in the 6-point movement. On 5th February 1966, a conference of the opposition parties was held in Lahore. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman proposed the 6-point program there to regain all kinds of rights for the Bengalis of East Pakistan. Mainly, these 6 points were the demand for autonomy of the province. The people of East Pakistan would have the full right to rule themselves while staying united with western part of Pakistan. Now let's see what were the 6 points demand. Number 1. A new constitution has to be written according to the spirit of historical Lahore Declaration of 1940. The country should be based on parliamentary form of government. The parliament and legislatures should be formed with adult franchise. The legislatures should have the sovereignty. Number 2. The federal government, central, will have defense and foreign affairs of the country. All the rest affairs will be dealt by the state governments. 2 separate but freely convertible currencies for 2 wings have to be introduced. The responsibility of currency should be there in the hands of federal government. There should be 2 independent central banks for 2 wings. If this is not feasible, there should be 1 currency for both the wings. But that should be done ensuring stoppage of the flight of capital from East to West Pakistan. The power of taxation and revenue collection should be vested on state governments. The federal government would get a fixed share of the collected revenue by the state government. Number 5. There has to be 2 separate accounts for the foreign exchange earnings of the 2 wings. Each state government should have full rights over the earned foreign exchange and should contribute to the federal government equally or in a ratio to be fixed. The constitution should empower the units to establish trade links with foreign countries. And at last, number 6, East Pakistan should have a separate paramilitary force. Now let's see the reaction to 6-point movement. General Ayub Khan, the martial law administrator, got afraid of the 6-point demand. He realized that such autonomy for East Pakistan would end all their exploitations. They were also worried about independence of the wing someday. That would lessen the foreign exchange earning of Pakistan because the greatest source of foreign exchange earning of Pakistan uh, uh, of East Pakistan was jute. That took less in the foreign exchange earning of Pakistan because the greatest source of foreign exchange of Pakistan was jute of the East. However, this earning was diverted to civil and military sectors of the West instead of the East Pakistan. Bengalis hardly had any higher position in job sector. This monopoly for the West Pakistanis would end with the autonomy of the East. Therefore, the conspiracies began again. Many cases were filed against Bangabandhu in various districts of the province. Leaders and workers of the Awami League were arrested. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Tajuddin Ahmed, and many other party leaders were subjected to this kind of harassment. But the movement could not be silenced because of the firm leadership of Bangabandhu and his widespread popularity. East Pakistan was facing a critical situation after being subjected to continuous discrimination on a regional basis year after year. As a result, the economists, intelligentsia, and the politicians of East Pakistan started to raise questions about this discrimination, giving rise to the historic 6-point movement. Now let's move on to lesson 4, historic case of Agartala, state versus Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and others. In 1968, the Ayub and Monaim brought about an allegation of subversive activities against some civil and military personnel of East Pakistan. It was actually aimed at stopping the 6-point movement. The Pakistan government filed a case named Agartala Conspiracy Case. The case was filed against mentioned 35 people, including Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman as accused. The case stated that the accused had been attempting to create an independent state in East Pakistan, that the accused had been attempting to create an independent state in East Pakistan with Indian support. The ultimate goal of the government was to prove all 35 along with Bangabandhu as enemies of Pakistan and award them capital punishment. Thus, they wanted to silence political agitations altogether. However, the military-led government finally had to retreat in the face of massive protests from students and general people. They were compelled to withdraw the case and free all prisoners. The Agartala conspiracy case was a sedition case in Pakistan during the Ayub regime against Awami League, brought by the government of Pakistan in 1968 against Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the then leader of the Awami League and East Pakistan, and 34 other persons. The case was filed in early 1968 and implicated Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and others in conspiring with India against the stability of Pakistan. The case is officially called State versus Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and others, but is popularly known as Agartala Shorojantra Mamla or Agartala Conspiracy Case, as the main conspiracy was purported to have taken place in the Indian city of Agartala in Tripura state, where Sheikh Mujib's associates met Indian military officials. On 22nd February 2011, one of the accused of Agartala conspiracy case, Shaukat Ali, told the parliament in Bangladesh that the Agartala conspiracy case was not false and the charges brought against the accused were all true. He also confirmed that Mujibur Rahman and Muhammad Ali Reza had indeed gone to Agartala, India to seek Indian support for Bangladesh's independence. Now let's move on to the 11-point movement. Students of Dhaka University took to the streets with 11 points alongside the 6 points. This started mass demonstration. The 11-point demands included introduction of direct adult poll and parliamentary democracy, complete autonomy for East Pakistan, nationalization of banks, insurances, and heavy industries, lessening of tax and revenue for farmers, freeing of all political prisoners, and withdrawal of all their cases. Now let's move on to lesson 5, the mass uprising of 1969. In January 1969, Chhatra League, Chhatra Union and Jatiyo Chhatra Federation formed all-party Chhatra Sangram Porishad with a view to ousting General Ayub Khan. Students started agitation programs in favor of their 11 points alongside the 6 points of Awami League. The government started using policy atrocity to suppress the agitation. On 20th January 1969, when the police opened indiscriminate fire on agitating students in Dhaka, Asaduzzaman, a student of Dhaka University, was killed. This killing transformed the agitation into a mass uprising. On 15 February 1969, Sergeant Jahurul Haq, an accused of the Agartala case, was shot dead in captivity condition at Kurmitola cantonment of Dhaka. Dr. Samsudzoha, a Rajshahi University teacher, was brutally killed by the Pakistan Army personnel on 16 February. At that moment, he was busy pacifying the agitated students. News of these killings lit the fire of discontent among the mass people. Failing to sustain the tides of the movement, the military-led government was compelled to withdraw the Agartala case and free all the accused unconditionally on 22nd February 1969. Finding no other way, the frightened General Ayub Khan resigned from the presidency on 25th March. He handed over the presidency to General Yahya Khan. Thus, the students and the people obtained another success in their movement. In January 1969, East Pakistan was an image of unstoppable revolt. 1,000 miles to the west, the other part of Pakistan devised its own and similar means of protest. On this day in 1969, the movement to force the Ayub Khan regime from power gathered pace when the young school student Matinur Rahman and a rickshaw puller were shot down by the police on the streets of Dhaka. It was one more sign of the regime's increasing nervousness, especially in East Pakistan, where a popular uprising against a 10-year dictatorship was swiftly beginning to take shape. Ironically, the self-styled Field Marshal Muhammad Ayub Khan and his government had just come through a raucous observance of what they called a decade of progress. The reference being to the 10 years of Ayub's grip on power. In January 1969, all the portents of doom were there for the regime. All the prognostications pointed to the coming fall of a civil-military complex that was unable to hold back the popular urge for democracy in Pakistan. 4 days prior to the murder of Matiur, the young Asaduzzaman had been killed in police firing. Desperation was at work, given that people in both East and West Pakistan were beginning to get restive, demonstrating every sign of wanting a change. In Dhaka, it was already becoming clear that the trial of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and 34 other Bengalis in the Agartala conspiracy case was beginning to unravel. Students of Dhaka University had come together to form the Sarbodoliyo Chhatra Sangram Porishad, determined to articulate their 11 points. And of course, the 6 points publicly announced by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in February 1966 in Lahore formed the centerpiece of the revolt against entrenched authority. And into the picture came the fiery maverick Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bhashani, having in the early 1960s advised the country not to disturb Ayub owing to the latter's growing closeness to Mao's China. Bhashani was now a powerful voice in defense of the popular urge for restoration of democracy. In January 1969, East Pakistan was an image of unstoppable revolt. 1,000 miles to the west, the other part of Pakistan devised its own and similar means of protest. Students in Peshawar, Karachi, and Lahore, in a manner that was as unprecedented as it was welcome, voiced their gathering furry through the streets and broad avenues of the cities. Khan Abdul Wali Khan and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the latter a lapsed protege of Ayub Khan, were in prison, having injected energy into the demand for change. In effect, by the time of upsurge took a definitive shape in Dhaka, an entire country was out on the streets clamoring for change. Mass upsurge day in January 69 was thus a defining moment in history, especially in the territory that would eventually emerge as the independent Republic of Bangladesh. With demands increasingly being made for the withdrawal of the Agartala case and the release of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the regime felt unable to ward off the pressure. Its alienation was deep and deepened with the academic Zoha was murdered in yet one more instance of reckless police action in East Pakistan. The entirety of East Pakistan was a loud symbol of protest, with Bhashani publicly advocating a policy of Jalao Gherao, burn and besiege. Ayub Khan and his ministers were compelled to reach out to the opposition. The DAC was asked to nominate its representatives to a roundtable conference in Rawalpindi in February. The regime offered to free Mujib on parole to enable him to join the RTC, and offered the imprisoned Awami League chief rejected with disdain. On the streets of Dhaka and other cities in East Pakistan, students and citizens across the spectrum marched to demand his unconditional release, a demand echoed by an increasingly fiery Bhashani. The early signs of the regime's coming capitulation emerged when Wali Khan and Bhutto were released in mid-February. In Dhaka, the government went for a self-inflicted blow on its fraying reputation when the army killed Sergeant Zahurul Haq, one of the Agartala case accused in the cantonment. The flames of popular resistance leaped higher, forcing the chief presiding judge in the Agartala case trial, S.A. Rahman, to flee to West Pakistan. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his co-accused were freed on 22nd February through an announcement in Dhaka by Vice Admiral A.R. Khan, the regime's Minister of Defense. Mujib's political ascendancy was complete when the next day at a million-strong rally at the racecourse, he was publicly honored as Bangabandhu, friend of Bengal. On 24th February 1969, he travelled to Rawalpindi to take his place at the RTC. Asked by newsmen at Chaklala Airport for his comments on his changed circumstances, Bangabandhu had a six-word response: yesterday a traitor, today a hero. At the airport to welcome his was Asghar Khan. The roundtable conference following its inaugural session was adjourned to early March when Bangabandhu made it clear that while parliamentary elections and adult franchise were necessary for the people of East Pakistan, the future would come in the more substantive form of a six-point program of regional autonomy. Meanwhile, Bhutto and Bhashani, having decided to stay away from the RTC, sealed their own pact on what needed to be done. The outcome was a disaster for Pakistan. Bangladesh rose on the ashes of East Pakistan in December 1971, and Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in prison in Pakistan since 25th March 1971, returned home in triumph in January 1972. It was an epic tale of Bengali aspirations being articulated and Bengali ambitions finding fulfillment. It all began with the mass upsurge taking shape in January 1969. That's all for today. Please stay positive and be connected to friends and family. Stay safe, stay positive.